All right, it's time for another update and forecast on the Gifford fire. It was pretty active yesterday, so what we're going to do first is look at where some of that growth was yesterday, then we're going to get into the current conditions, and then we're going to look at things like topography, the dry fuels, and the weather forecast to try to figure out where this fire might be moving as we move forward. Now, the first thing I will say, though, is I do these updates every day, and I'll notice sometimes people will be watching ones from a couple of days ago, so maybe before you spend your time watching this video, check my channel to see if I've done one more recently than the one you're watching right now. Obviously, that isn't true for the people who are watching this live, so let's just get into it. That was the view from today. You saw some puffs of smoke coming up here and there. It actually looked like there was more activity about an hour to 2 hours ago, but we'll dive more into that when it comes to the current conditions. First thing we'll do for the Gifford fire is just figure out where it is. Bay Area, Los Angeles down here, and then we zoom into the Central Coast. You got San Luis Obispo. I went to Cal Poly, love that area down there. And then we have Santa Maria, and then about 12 to 15 miles northeast of Santa Maria is where we have the Gifford fire and the Santa Lucia wilderness. Depending on where you're from, you might say that differently. Here's the Gifford fire's basic details. There's still a lot of evacuation orders and warnings in place. I never go through those because by the time you're watching this video, it might have changed. But the acreage is now up to around 111,000 acres. They haven't given us a new fire progression map, but the one from yesterday, I still think paints a picture of what this fire has been doing. The blue is where this fire started around August 1st, and then it grew through August 2nd. And then the red color is where the most recent fire growth has been. So we had a lot of growth on this northwestern side on August 7th. Surprisingly, a lot of that was actually overnight when we had the winds pick up. And then most of our growth yesterday, so August 8th, what you can't see on this map, is also going to be on the northwest right there, but then also a little slop over on the northeast that we'll be able to see better when we look at a different map. But first, the containment actually did go up to 21%, so I'm interested to see where that containment went up. This map is new from this morning, and looks like most of it is on this southwestern side that connects to 166, and then also on this eastern side that connects with the Madre fire. Now, I'll be honest, every time I showed this map, there's so much going on, I couldn't figure out what the Madre fire actually is. I'm pretty sure it is that black shaded color that you see right there. That just looks like a fire shape, and then it goes all the way into the Gifford fire, and that's why we have such great containment on that eastern side, is because a lot of those fuels burnt out earlier this year. But then the problem in the northwestern side, up here where you get up to the Garcia Wilderness, I believe is what it's called, some of these fuels haven't burned in over 30 years, and at that point it's like you've never even had a fire there. So that's why we've seen as much activity as we have. Then on this southwestern side, part of the reason that's good news is that's one of the areas on the fire where we're closest to the largest amount of structures. So we'll look at that map in just a moment. But first, I always start with this when it comes to current conditions. It just gives us a quick snapshot of how active the fire is. It did look like it was fairly active earlier in the day, but I mean, it's only, what, 4:44 right now. And the smoke is starting to die down. Usually you just see that smoke continue all the way through the afternoon. So it shows that they're doing some great work on this fire. I would say that decrease in activity would be due to aircraft and crews that we have on this, because the weather conditions are about as bad as they've been right now. It's some temperatures in the triple digits, relative humidity maybe even in the single digits, and those afternoon winds picking up. So that doesn't actually look as bad right now as it did 2 hours ago. And even 2 hours ago, it didn't look as bad as it looked yesterday. Yesterday, we had 3 different big plumes coming off of this fire. This is going to be able to tell us a bit better where the fire is actually active right now. That satellite imagery is helpful for a general view, but this is actually where we get into the details. There's our fire perimeter. This is the structures. This is what I was saying about how it's great news that we do have some containment on the southwestern side, because you can see that's pretty close to a lot of those orange dots right there, which is where we have structures. And then also on the southeastern side as well, you have orange dots going right up to that fire perimeter. But then when we look at where we have containment, that's right where you have those structures, where we have that black line, and then also on that southern side as well. And southern side, we haven't seen heat there in a while. If we look at the modus and veers, the yellow to orange dots, I always say this, but it's helpful to know, that's where the fire was active more than 24 hours ago. The red dots are going to be where it was active yesterday. So this is why I love this map so much, because you hear the number 111,000 acres and you think, oh, this thing is just raging everywhere. But there's actually a lot of nuance to a fire. And for example, if you're down here in Kuyama, this entire eastern and southern side of the fire hasn't been doing much recently. So your alarm bells can actually decrease. Whereas if you're up closer to this northwestern side of the fire, that's where you would still want to keep a close eye on things like evacuation orders and warnings. Well, really everyone keep a close eye on those. Then that's my disclaimer right there. But it is helpful knowing where the fire actually is active. So yesterday, we did have a little something happen here in the south yesterday afternoon. I don't know why the satellite imagery is not showing that, but if we zoom in here, you can see, I believe it was this little finger that extended yesterday afternoon. And that was because we had those southwesterly winds, and then it was able to, it's either that finger right there where it pushed it up this hill, or it's that finger right there where it pushed it up that hill. And that was directly when we were recording yesterday. We had a column going up right there. It looks like they've gotten a handle on that though, and then most of the action appears to be in the north. So how I know that is because, one, the red stars, that's where most of the heat was yesterday. There's that slop over that I was talking about that wasn't on our progression map. See right there, it's not showing anything. And then there was that spot where it jumped over where we had the previous fire perimeter, and then actually was able to grow a few hundred acres, but they've definitely made this a big priority. The majority of the action has been on this northwestern side though. And then if we click on structures, that's where you could make some silver lining. There's not nearly as many structures on this northern side as, for example, if we were talking about the southwestern or the southern side right there. However, we do have a few clusters, so I just want to measure how close we are to those. Let's take it from roughly the fire perimeter to right there. That is looking closer than yesterday, about 4 miles to that one. And then if we take it from that slop over to those structures, that's about 5.5 miles. So based on how fast it's been moving, I'd say my main concern is the northwestern side, although based on the satellite imagery right now and the fact that it looks like it's decreasing in activity, I mean, I'm feeling somewhat good about this afternoon. I'm always very hesitant to say that in California, though, especially when you have fuels that haven't burned in 30 years and it's about as hot and dry as you're ever going to see it. The other thing we can do that is helpful is look at the most recent heat activity. I'll just warn you, this always overestimates things, but it's still helpful to look at. Interestingly, it has some heat coming off of this part of the fire right there, which is, we saw that somewhat active yesterday, but not that active. So going to be keeping an eye on that. Let's see if it's close to any structures. Not so much. And then we also have some containment as we start to get down there, so we wouldn't expect it to be able to push south. But then on this northwestern side, that's where clearly we have the most heat coming off of the fire. That's why that's my top priority, keep an eye on. And then there is still some heat on that slop over. So while they've made some progress on it, it doesn't look like that is out. And given these conditions, I wouldn't expect it to be out. So let's look at the northwestern side, because that seems to be where they're kind of focusing their aircraft right now. That gives you a better idea of what that slop over was on that northeastern side. But let's just take a look in here, because this is going to give us kind of idea what's going on. You see some aircraft going in there, helicopters making some water drops. And here's why this has been so active. The fuels are incredibly dry, and then the winds can pick up burning embers, drop them out ahead of the major blaze, and then it's able to quickly rush upslope. So, and you look at this steep, rugged terrain. It's amazing that they have crews working in there in triple-digit heat and these kind of conditions. It's just unbelievable. So props to everybody who's out on this fire. That does give us a brief idea, though, of where the fire seems to be growing right now. So that's the topography. We've talked about the dry fuels. I think that all pretty much makes sense at this point. Interested to see what's going to change in the weather forecast, though, because we would like to see things improve. Although when we checked yesterday, it actually looked like things were potentially going to be getting worse. We'll say you have some moisture pushing in along the coast. If only we could have stronger winds, westerly winds, to push some of that moisture in over the fire. But as it turns out, our fire is quite hot and dry. Today, this forecast for our spot is saying around 90, but isolated pockets on the fire could still be in the triple digits. Relative humidity, single digits in some cases, but mostly in the teens. And then the same southwesterly winds in the afternoon. Although we're not seeing the smoke move as much right now as what we saw yesterday. So that kind of tells us that the winds aren't as strong as yesterday, that the smoke's not being dispersed as fast. Sunday looks to be hotter, and then Monday looks to be even hotter. Still hot Tuesday, still hot Wednesday. Very similar winds each afternoon. I would say my biggest concern moving forward is going to be Monday, because that's the hottest day. If this spot is saying up close to triple digits, and then you also see that the winds pick up a little then too. More of a westerly, southwesterly, 20 to 25 miles per hour. So that would try to push the fire up more in this direction. I guess if you have to have the fire pushed somewhere, you would want it pushed up that way because it's away from where we have the most structures. But yeah, I think Monday is going to be the tricky one. So I'll definitely be doing updates throughout the next couple of days. And it might be a while before this one is officially out. So just kind of checking what we're talking about. Hot and dry conditions persist across the incident today. Afternoon temperatures climb into the 90s to triple digits, while humidity drops into the teens, down to the single digits. Southwesterly up canyon winds can be expected this afternoon, around 20 miles per hour. Pretty much just a brief summary of what we were talking about. And then hot and dry conditions will continue into early next week. And if anything, it's getting hotter and drier, although no significant wind events expected. So if you need your silver lining, I always try to look for it. Winds, not a huge factor on this fire, although it does look like it's going to get a little windier on Monday. So I'm putting a little star in my memory bank for Monday afternoon. And then the hot and dry conditions will continue to produce very elevated fire weather conditions. So that's kind of the bad news, that the weather forecast still looks quite tricky. The good news is it doesn't look as active right now as it did 2 hours ago. Although it looks like we have maybe one little plume starting to pop up. So always keep an eye on that. The other good news, total personnel is now up to 3,600. And when we're looking at the 3D imagery, we've got some aircraft. There's a helicopter right now flying over this fire. They've just been hitting this thing nonstop ever since it started. And you can trust that they will continue to do that. So I'll continue to do these.